All right, looks like we're live. Isabel, how are you doing this week?
Good. I'm well. Doing
Good,
awesome.
good. This is our 13th episode now, and we're really there's a nice fluctuation of listeners coming in.
Yeah.
And 13th episode, it's almost kind of funny. Our 13th episode, we have our third guest on today.
Oh,
Mm.
I like that. Those are like
And,
simple.
and yeah, so today our guest would be Chris from the Heart Center. And Isabel, you're probably going to be better at giving an intro on that than I am.
Yeah. Kristen is just an awesome person. I met Chris almost a year ago, right? Almost.
Yeah, I think it's been closer to a year, if not a little over a year, actually.
And what I love about Chris is that he has like, first of all, he was an athlete, and I think if you see Chris, you'll know that he was an athlete. He has that build. And second, he is the founder of the Heart Center, which I think is a really cool concept, which he's going to share a little bit more with us today. And he's just an awesome guy. So I'm really excited to have Chris on the podcast Synergy today. And like we do with any guest, we're going to let Chris chit chat, but also share about his word of the day.
Well, welcome,
Awesome.
Chris.
Thank you, Wind, and thank you, Isabel. It's awesome to connect with both of you. I really, really admire and appreciate the work that both of you do for the world and this reality.
Ah,
Wink, wink. No, really, it's profound, and meeting both of you has been life changing on many different levels for me. And the work that is done with the Heart Center is really a replication of the relationships I have with people who come into my life and who are doing this work. So, thank you both for opening up this space and holding this energy for all of us to be synergistic.
well, and in truth be told, me and Isabel wouldn't even be doing this podcast if it weren't for you, Chris, because we met
Mm,
through you.
That is so
mm.
true.
Yeah, it's cool how we can all be fractals and play such important roles for each other. Never know like where it's gonna go. Never know, how me and Wynn's conversations were gonna lead to this. How
Right.
me and Isabel were gonna lead to the Heart Center. So, I mean, I'm feeling the nudge. I mean, this is really the word I want to talk about, which is reality, right? If I can go ahead and do that,
Do
like
it.
this is exactly what we're talking about. Reality is something that we um, don't really know, but we experience, right? Um, and I think this is a perfect example where there's three of us doing this call right now. We all came from different walks of life, and the reality was no one had any idea how this was going to play out, right? But through being present, through communicating, through just being honest and sincere and really loving, something blossomed, right, on many different levels. So I wrote something the other day about beauty and how beauty is something that cannot be expressed. It can only be experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about reality, all the things that we deem reality are a projected reality. So this conversation is a projection of what we're feeling internally and that we want to emanate to other people and to each other. But it's really only a projection. It is not the essence of the feeling that we're trying to share with people. So for me personally, in order to truly experience reality, Isabel and I have spoken about this, it's more about being. It's about allowing the reality to just be expressed, experienced, just experienced. So if you take the analogy of a flower, when you see a flower, the first thing you want to say is that's beautiful. But the second you say that, you have taken that flower and labeled it, you've taken a little bit something away from it because now you're not experiencing the flower for what it is. You're now trying to label and categorize it, which is a mind thing, right?
You've added something to it, a projection.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So you projected beauty onto it, which is a fine thing to do. But there's something even more subtle and more, again, amazing by just looking at that flower and just knowing just feeling the beauty that it's sharing with you. So that's my introduction to reality. It's something that
and to go further, the fact that you're calling it a flower has already given it a projection, because whatever it really is, it doesn't have a name, at least that we can, we wouldn't be able to hear the name. Certainly in English we say flower, in other like other Latin-based cultures, it might be something more like fiora or something like that, yeah, like, so even we can't even agree that what we're looking at should be called the exact same thing, let alone how we should perceive it. Because I might look at a flower and be like, okay, there's a flower, or there's a thing that has color to it on a plant that's growing up in front of me or inside my house or whatever.
Right. So
we can't even agree on the essence of anything. It's all a projection of what we decide to collaborate upon. Right.
Hence reality. So then the question is, what is reality? How do we know reality? How do we know ourselves through reality? I think that's something I'm asking, continually asking, is what is reality? How do we know why do we even use that word? What are we getting at whenever we're saying that?
Isabel, what's the word for reality in French?
Réalité.
Huh?
Réalité.
Okay. See, I can't even pronounce that. So what's reality?
What's reality? Yeah, exactly. and I think it's interesting because it's a perception, right? Like it's the way that you're perceiving something with senses, with human senses. That's how I see it right now in the current state. And I don't know, maybe you didn't catch that, but when I was introducing Chris, I purposely described him physically, because I was like, I was trying to get into that reality space and trying to create an image, a perception for the audience. And I rarely ever describe people by their physical capacity. So I really did that on purpose to see, like, is anyone going to catch that? Is anyone going to feel that it's weird that I said that?
Yeah, I did. I was like, I think that's the first time in a while I've heard someone describe me, by my athletic endeavors. So that was definitely something I picked up on, but now it makes sense. And I think we just discovered something really important, right? So all three of us agree that reality is not something that you can really define, but what you can do with your projection is you can get a sense of what you're at least trying to say, right? So there's this concept of this undefinable reality, but through that, it has its own characteristics. We call it the five senses.
Five senses, yeah. Oh, we lost Chris.
How funny, right at that perfect time, we've lost him.
Right when we needed the senses to perceive him.
Are you guys getting me okay?
Well, now we are, but as you were describing reality and the five senses, you disappeared.
Are we here?
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
How perfect. I love it.
Yeah, that was cool because you guys were there the whole time. Yeah. So exactly. So reality is this thing that we live in a synthetic reality, right? I think, from my own meditative practices, I've experienced where the second we try to define, what we are, whatever reality is we're actually losing the point of the whole thing, right? So we're losing the point of it, right? So we need to kind of bring ourselves back to know that, Isabel, you actually taught me this, or reminded me this, the art of being. And through that beingness, you're able to move with this synthetic reality, knowing deep within, in your heart space, that this isn't the ultimate. This is just something that I'm experiencing, right? If need be, I can always tune in or allow myself to let go of the five senses so that I can feel that eternal, everlasting, ever omnipresence that is permeating all things.
Yeah.
Some would say that's like the ultimate reality, but even then, if we have that conversation, how do we know,
It's interesting because, and for you, Wynn, and for the listeners, Chris and I have had a lot of conversation because Chris was just seeking some guidance, I guess, about the next step and what to do. And the message that I got at that time was that a lot of people practice meditation, practice yoga, practice different things. And it has become just that, a practice. It's no longer being. It's like, oh, this morning I get up, I have to do meditation. Like it becomes an action as opposed to a being. And I think when you embrace being very well, like you're someone who is very much in the moment and have that capacity to flow. And I was just sharing with Chris that being is just like the tree. It's like it's there, but yet the tree becomes the nest for many birds, but yet the tree hasn't done anything different. It's just being there. So it was kind of like that message that Chris is sharing about the aspect of being. So
right, yeah.
Just yesterday, because I do landscaping work, we were parked in front of this tree, and on the tree it had this a good 2 foot long section. It looked like a canopy. Inside the canopy, the leaves were all dead, as opposed to the rest of the tree that was fully alive. And so at first my coworker and he was writing down the things that we just did at the job, and I was just kind of looking at this tree going, I've never seen anything like this before. And then I was like, is that a spider web? Did somebody intentionally put a canopy over that? And he said, no, it's these caterpillars. They build this entire world inside there, and it always kills a portion of the tree. And he presented it as problematic, and he's like, like as if it's an issue that these caterpillars do that to a tree. And I said, well, that's from the human perception. What about the tree's perception? Or what about the caterpillar's perception? It sounds like, like a perfect symbiotic relationship of life and death there. So who makes the rules on if that's okay? If we're saying that's not okay, then we're telling nature it's not doing its job the right way.
Right, exactly. When that's so perfect, 'cause it's, again, taking yourself out of the end all be all, like this is how it's supposed to be, and just being in that environment and seeing how the tree's responding, instead of projecting onto the tree, this is what you should be doing. Right? Because as you said, from our perspective, yeah, it could seem like the tree's dying, but maybe it is. But maybe that's what the tree called in. Maybe it was ready to move on to do something different with its life. We have no idea. And so we don't know what the reality of that tree and that symbiotic relationship of those caterpillars are. I actually found myself in the same situation because we have these things called gypsy moths. Have you guys heard of gypsy moths?
He asked that. Well, that's what he called it. It was a gypsy moth.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Right. So we have a tree in our yard where there was a bunch on them. And one day I went out and I was trying to get them off because they lay eggs. And I actually stopped and I said, wait a second. How do I know that this isn't actually perfect for what needs to happen? So it's funny that you bring that same analogy up. Because it wasn't the nest, but it was actually the moths themselves. But I think, again, for the listeners and also for us to remember, there's nothing that we have to do. There's nothing that we have to be. It's really just, I don't know what the word is. There's no word to define it.
But, is it?
Right. But the second we try to tell the tree and the moth, that's not right, you can't do this, then that's when we start to lose that essence. So this is awesome.
I would say the absolute truth is that there is no absolute truth.
Yeah.
Because it's always so subjective. Even on I've in meditation traveled to 30th or 60th dimension at this point. I don't remember now, but in those states where everything is just like it's indescribable by any. There would be no way anybody would be able to know what it was unless they sat in that energy themselves. And then you can't talk about it because that's not a communicable place. From that place, it's so far removed from the human experience, which if you had to go on an accordion almost, the human experience is so low on the scale compared to that place. But it's not but at the same time, it's completely one as a flat line. So it's completely interwoven. And yet, but the human experience is so like fundamentally obtuse compared to that truth space, you know. And I don't know what's beyond the 60th dimension or the 30th dimension. I can't, again, whichever one I was in, but you know, like, but everything in between the human experience and that experience is like, I guess if we had to use a description, light years of comprehension. But it can happen in an instant. It can happen in an instant, and just in a meditation where you return to that space. And in the other point that I have is when I was in that space multiple times, it's also very malleable. It is not solid. It is not concrete. It's also shifting, and it's shifting based off of all the things that we would call life forms or planets or solar systems, all the different mathematical experiences that are happening between it and from where it's spread out. So it's all of those things at the same time that it's also nothing.
When this is, Isabel, did you want to say something?
No.
I didn't.
Go ahead.
So you said two things right there. You said 30 and 60. Then you described a dimension that is undefinable and that you cannot comprehend. What's really cool about this is that you use numbers. And so the numbers you used really trickle down to, or simplify to 3 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And the number 9, right? So the heart center is the 9. We have the pine cone. You know this, right? And we have the 9. One version of reality is, and that's the cool thing about reality, is that you can make it be what you want. That's the cool thing. That's why it's infinite. Moreover, the number 9 represents that infinite, undefinable, complete potentiality of all things that then disseminates itself into the 3 and the 6. And the 3 and the 6 then are the polarities that the human experience is held in. Some would say good and bad, right? Right and wrong. But what's happening really is that we are getting that human experience, which is the third thing that you said that's really important. The third thing is the human experience of this, of reality, of whatever reality that we can't define. And through that human experience, we can get a glimpse of these higher dimensions, right? But at the same time, you said something else where you can come back in an instant. And that's because all things are all things. All things are all things. So the ability to be in a meditation and go from, the 60th dimension back to the human experience is because ultimately there's one reality that is holding space for all those things to take place, much like that caterpillar nest that has created its own ecosystem for all these different experiences to take place. So you said all that, and it kind of just triggered everything to, I don't know, you had a lot of really awesome points I wanted to point out there. The human experience is a huge part of this, reality conversation.
That's interesting because it's almost like it goes back to...
Can you guys hear me okay now? Okay, cool.
Yeah, it goes back to the idea of like the illusion that we've talked about, and that we're basically, and that's why I think we called our truth self the divine creator. It's because we can create and manifest whatever we want, which is connected to that reality. And we had Allison that spoke about as a guest which episode was it? I think it was episode 9, the episode called Play. And she talked about her book, which is the era of the creator. And I totally feel that we're stepping into that space that we're starting to realize anyway, that reality is actually something that we, like you said, like it's movable, you can change it, like it doesn't stay fixed solid in one simple way. And I feel like we're moving into that space where people are starting to realize that and play with it and explore, like, okay, like, can I go from this state to another state in terms of like meditation state or physical state. And before we connected and started recording, Chris and I were talking about emotions. That's also part of reality. It's something that we can create. We can create a lot of emotions because it's all in our control within. And we can also shift those emotions or shift that reality. So it is interesting because it all goes back to the name of this podcast, which is synergy, the capacity to embrace the human experience while also being part of that exponential aspect of us. And that goes back to the 9, the 6, and the 3. It's all that. And I like how you say, Chris, that the 3 and the 6 is like the human experience, because it is part of the 9. It's part of everything we experience on Earth.
Yeah. Cool. That was really interesting. But I got back on at a really cool time. Yeah. That's funny to me. Yeah, and you said something, Isabel. We're learning how to basically embody all these different things and learn how to create from those different spaces. And that couldn't be more true. It couldn't be more true that we're learning that there's no right, there's no wrong. There's creation, right? Then there's chaos, but chaos breeds order, right? So there's these different levels of life, reality that we're experiencing to tune into our divine creator. Something else, if both of you don't mind, I wanted to bring up is peace, is inner peace, and our relationship to that. And that kind of ties into reality. Is that something you guys are comfortable discussing, chatting about?
Yeah, bring it on.
Cool. I'm gonna bring it. So I've been recognizing in life, and if I look away, it's actually easier for me to think this way if I'm like focused on the screen, that I can't really allow things to come through as easily. But that peace is something that a lot of people think is outside of themselves. And I'm sure both of you have heard this before, but it's something that we think is going to be found once our relationship is exactly how it should be, once the wars stop happening, once we're all on this kind of journey together where everything outside of us is perfect and blissful. And I think that's misleading for people, because I think that leaves people chasing. Mm-hmm. And what I want to represent and what I want to bring up is the fact that peace, inner peace, can be found in an argument. It can be found whenever you're angry. It can be found whenever there's a war going on, because your relationship to what's happening on the outside is not as important as your relationship to how those things make you feel and how you deal with them on the inside. So whenever you get an argument with someone, it is now your responsibility to take on that energy, because it's there. There's nothing you can do about it. And your relationship with that pain, with that energy in you, determines whether or not you will feel peace. So I think this is a concept that is newer, but I think it's one that's very important.
Wow,
okay, you guys are still there. I just want to know what you guys thought about that. There's more to it, but I just want that's found on the outside or something that you explore and experience within.
No, you put it into words so well. Like it's funny because I don't know if I shared that on the podcast yet, maybe when refresh my memory, but I've been looking for a home since October, and I've been putting things on the back burner saying, I'll be more connected to nature, I'll be more in my inner peace when I have a new home, and it's always external, and I realized that a couple months ago, and it's like, no, inner peace can happen right now. And I feel like, Chris, you've put it in words that totally explain what I've been living, and then also awakening to the fact that inner peace is a state. It's not a material world. It's not a belonging. It's not about control. It's about being. It's about allowing things to happen and not want to control it. Because inner peace often is reflected in our society by trying to control the outcomes, trying to control the relationship, trying to control the work or the boss or etc., the environment that we're in. What do you think, Wynn?
Yeah, because I was thinking, yeah, it's just when Chris was reading that, the idea that we'll experience peace when the world stops having wars is putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
The actuality is that we have to experience peace within more and more individually, which strengthens, which makes the collective stronger in a peaceful inner way. That's what generates peace. The caveat to that is, what if the world stays in a war-like place, but yet we have a lot of people at peace on the inside? Then you might just say, well, we have the art of war, we have original yoga. More people were just more like honoring the game, the battle that we're about to play, because we're in this battlefield sort of like setting called Earth, where we can do whatever we want. And for some people, play is actually war. But if you're doing it from a place of inner peace, then you're going back to the art of war from Sun Tzu. You're going back even before that. You're going to early yoga, when like Krishna was delivering yoga to Arjuna on a battlefield.
Really?
You know, like, yeah, it's all about like yoga. Yoga is just like, well, but if you actually and yoga poses, warrior 1, warrior 2, warrior 3, these are poses. In some ways, if you go in a certain sequence, you actually bow to your opponent before you engage in the art of war with them.
Oh, I did not know that. That's interesting.
And then you have something like more like UFC, where UFC is a little, typically, at least the last time I was watching it, a little more like really honoring each other. Sometimes they're aggressive and sometimes they're not very nice. But collectively, when I was watching UFC for a few years, 9 times out of 10, they were all like, man, you whipped my ass good. Like, that was a good game. Like, that's the art of battling, because it's something we can do with honor and respect.
That's interesting.
And so the world may very well always stay in a place of having war. So this is one of the things that I like to ping on the spiritual community about, is like, if you want the world to change, you still have to be the change on the inside. You still can't make the world change, which will make you suddenly like adapt to the climate better. You have to adapt to the world as it is and be the change on the inside, and then you can find the appreciation for things, and then your world will change. You will perceive it differently, which then makes reality a very different experience for you.
That's so true. And it goes back to what Chris is saying, right? Like, it's that inner peace. It's inside, and it's who you are.
And even more simply, your relationship to pain is vital. Your relationship to what is uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, we are in a reality that isn't suitable to the human body. The human body is designed to want to experience pleasure, right? So we have to learn that pleasure is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. So your relationship to this impermanence, and it, like Wynn said, if you can go to battle, and Wynn, using your analogy of UFC, and if I can use UFC and like football for that example, every time I went out to play football, to play a game, I was doing that to win, to score more points. But it wasn't from a place of, I'm better than you, you're not as good as me. It was strictly the art of war. It was coming from a place of peace for the simple experience, right? And so that is way different than going into a game feeling like you need to dominate, hurt, destroy your opponent. The destruction is a inevitable piece of war. That's going to happen. But that should not be why you go into it. You're going into it because this is, when, as you said, the nature of one of the realities that we're choosing to play out. right? But we can do that from an internal place of peace. Now, what happens is people get attached to pleasure, right? So when they're in tense situations that feel uncomfortable, biologically, we're designed to only want to experience pleasure. So we push away things that hurt us. It's a very natural thing to do. What we're learning to do, part of this new creator is learning how to be in pain and uncomfortable things and be able to have compassion to them, have kindness to it. So through that compassion, through that kindness, you are simply acknowledging that this sucks. This does not feel does not feel good right now. But I have two choices. I can either continue to suffer and demonize the pain, or I can do it from a place of peace, compassion, and love and kindness and say, pain, dude, right now you are kicking my butt. I acknowledge you. I accept you. Right? But I'm not going to move through this with you from a place of suffering. And through that, for me at least, that's where inner peace is beginning to show itself, is the relationship to things internally that are uncomfortable. From the outside, this can look like this person is so angry, they're so upset. Yes, but you have no idea how I'm processing this internally. What is my internal relationship to those feelings? And often you'll find that those feelings begin to dissipate much quicker whenever you react to them with anger and resentment, because you are too hard on yourself because you acted out and you're angry. So what? You punch someone in the face. Let's talk about that. You punch someone in the face. Are you going to continue to make yourself suffer more by beating your own self up? Or can you be compassionate and say, dude, that sucks because you know how bad you hurt that person. And I'm going to be kind to this emotion right now, so being mean to it. And I think it's just important for people to realize that they have the power to really live from a place of peace, even when things feel uncomfortable. I'm speaking from personal experience, you know, and knowing that it does no good for me to continue to demonize the pain and make the pain the enemy. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So that's kind of the gist here.
That's interesting because it just makes me think. I work in a hospital and I see people suffering all the time, pain, and just like hearing you, it reminds me of individuals who are like on like their deathbed basically. There's an energy that you just nailed it that I feel around them is often inner peace. It's like it's so calm to be in their space. It's so but yet the whole reality of it is so sad and so painful for so many people around. But in some ways, they find a way that in the dying process to find inner peace, which is really interesting because it's probably one of the most chaotic experience for the body.
Yeah.
My massage, in my second massage school, I did 2 in 1 year, and the second one, the teacher there used to say, and she was about the age of my mom, about 20 years older than me. She said, you know, if somebody could have saved anybody in the world, it would have been me, because I can tell you I have tried many, many times in many different ways, and it's never worked. So she said, I came to understand what a teacher once told me through firsthand experience, that you can't pretend to know what anybody's here to learn or anybody's here to teach. And if we can just go to that, we can understand that the very nature of reality is so dynamic, because even when we're in a relationship intimately with somebody, even if it's just one person or if it's many people, but let's just say with one person, we're presupposing in the traditional, I mean, it's not even traditional, right? Because before 2-person marriage was polyamory. So in the system that we currently have of one male, one female, which I guess has finally changed in the U.S. a few years ago, in that you're presuming that on this journey now you're taking on the world together. What you're lacking is the the actual reality, which is that two of you have two different realities, and you're trying to learn to co-create something from those two very different realities, even if you have so many things in common with each other, even if you're talking a twin flame relationship, a soulmate relationship, a whatever. You have many things that obviously draw you together, but you also have so many things that ordinarily we say, well, this doesn't belong in our relationship and this doesn't belong in our relationship. So you start to cut out truths that each of you carry. Mm-hmm. And you start to try to create a brand new reality. Mm-hmm. And you try to create, then you have friends and family members and everybody else, and maybe you have children and animals, and you have this whole system that's trying to validate your version of reality that you're trying to say matches everybody else's reality that's also married and wants to have the house. It's like, but basically, fundamentally, you've actually cut out a whole spectrum. You have maybe 1 or 2% of a 360-degree circle encompassed, and you're calling it a complete experience, which is also a reality choice in and of its own, but it's not the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is that plus all the other realities that could be brought in, even just between the two of you, if you chose to allow more things in, let alone like how many other things are possible that the world doesn't even allow yet, because there's so many things based off of what we say is okay and not okay.
Right. It's so true. Huh. And it's funny when I was listening to, I can't remember what it was, but it was a book, and he was talking about the role of rules in our society. So like all different rules that we have, which one would be like, well, not anymore, but it used to be, like you said, marriage was male and female, and that was the rule. And all of a sudden, there's some people that change those rules. And I'm not saying rules necessarily like a politic or something that is written down. It's just more like something that we live by. And in his way of explaining rules in the spiritual aspect, it was like collective agreements that we had. And then all of a sudden, when someone have a different experience, they're trying to change the collective agreement, trying to change the reality of all of us, which is interesting because it's happening right now a lot with many things. Like our old rules no longer have any, it doesn't make any sense anymore. It's like we're creating collectively also a new reality. And one of the
based on multiple realities.
Yeah. And one of the perspective of like the heart center that Chris is the founder of is that we all have those gifts, and it's almost like we're recognizing that spiritual aspect of us, which, when it's starting to like expand so much also on earth right now. Like, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like everyone is talking about spirituality, and everyone is bringing up to the table and starting to explore that. It's almost like we're creating that new reality where spiritual aspect of the human experience is now the rule.
I feel like the shirt that I'm wearing today, and maybe not all listeners are going to be able to see it, but I feel like it represents what we're talking about. Yeah. Everything on this shirt is based off of the flower of life or sacred geometry, conjoining circles. But there's multiple ways of looking at it on one shirt. In some ways, you have like the Merkaba represented. In other ways, you can see the lines in some areas drawn that would intersect the center of each of the circles. In some areas, you just see the honeycomb.
Oh, yeah.
But it's all based off the exact same concentric circles, just in different ways. And this shirt, I think, represents what we're talking about. There's multiple ways to view, even if you just use sacred geometry or the flower of life. You're looking at the shirt, you're seeing at least 5 different ways of seeing the exact same thing.
That's so true.
Yeah. Hey guys, I just want to acknowledge, are you able, I know I keep cutting out. Do you have me right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, yes, when looking at things multidimensionally, Isabel, is what we're learning how to do. I lost you for a few moments there, guys, but I think I have enough to go to carry on. when your shirt reminds me of a story about a book. You guys may have heard me say this before, but for the listeners, there was a college professor who was teaching a class, and he held up a book, and he asked the class, "What color is this book?" And the class said, "Red." And he said, "No, it's black." And the students said, "No, it's definitely red." And the professor's like, "What are you talking about? It's clearly black." And so the students really started mumbling amongst themselves, "This guy's crazy. He's losing his mind. I don't know what's going on with him." And so the masses started to bicker. And so a few students start to get up and leave, and the professor says, "Before you leave this classroom, I want you to look at this." And he turns over the book, and his part of the book that he could see was red. The student's part was black. So what's the ultimate reality right there?
Mm-hmm.
What's the ultimate in that moment? The ultimate.
That exact example. Black, red.
That's so funny. That's so funny. That is awesome. And the ultimate in that moment is both exist simultaneously. Both are right. No one's wrong. It's not winning. It's not losing. It's not good. It's not bad. It is all encompassing. It's the devil. It's God. It's all of it. It's all of it. Yeah. And that is where I see us going as a human species with this reality thing. And what makes it easier is having inner peace. Because if you are continually fighting outside of you what doesn't feel good and needing, I see this a lot in the spiritual community where people, I think on some level we're all kind of guilty of it, where they demonize the political system, where Trump is doing this and so-and-so is doing that and so-and-so is getting beat up by the cops. Yes, preferably I wouldn't like to see any of those things happening, but at the same time, your focus on those things is perpetuating those things.
Right.
It's hey doggy, but it's also not accepting the totality of life and how life shows up. And when you said it earlier, with the tree and the caterpillar, accepting the caterpillar's role, because you have no idea what that caterpillar means to the tree. So I think your shirt is spot on, and that book that you happen to have is amazing. So
I think if I were have to set out to eradicate anything in my language, and I've been working on it this year, and I recognize that I haven't done really a lot of sessions for a lot of people in over a year for this reason, is to let my own paradigm completely shift into being present, as Isabel was talking about earlier. So present that the only thing that matters is play. And what I'm finding is that the more present I become and more playful I become, the more the moment that I'm in has all the answers.
Yeah.
And that there's the only answer is there's no forward answer other than whatever I choose at this moment.
I love it. Yes.
And it's not what's the right word? It's not a theory, and it's not a thing you can contemplate. In fact, switching into it is probably one of the most painful experiences I've ever put my body through, because it's not just happening in a day. It's happening through multiple days over multiple weeks and months. It's taking a long time, and it's really, really painful.
It's a big transition.
So, and it's very different. It's very different. And one thing that changes, and I mentioned this in the podcast we had with 1111 and Brian as Divisions as our guest, was that psychic information is also changing, because there's no such thing as psychic information when you're living in the moment, because in the moment the only variable is all the choices you have,
right?
And being able to process them so quickly, like a child would while they're playing in the sandbox,
right?
You process it so quickly. What do I want right at this moment? But you take all the variables of all the education that you've had in your life into play to be able to formulate what you might say would be an educated decision with each choice that you've made. And so if I had to go back to the beginning of what I was saying, if I had to eradicate anything at all, I would eradicate the word should from any language. The word should, and you said it a lot at the beginning, and I think I even said it a few times. once we say should, we've already eliminated a whole spectrum
Everything
of
else.
possibilities.
Right. This is so true. I think of my daughter Cora, who's 1.5. She has taught me a lot about being. She can go from blocks to TV to food to this to fall down, hit her head, cry, and never lose her presence, never lose her center. She's always 100% purely doing what she wants to do, but at the same time, she's not ever making anyone else feel bad about it. She's completely open. It is a vortex of energy that is saying yes to everything because it's safe, because she knows she's safe. She's saying yes to everything, experiencing everything. I'm sitting here watching this little being like, wow, and so on some levels, she is the epitome of what we're talking about. Being able to play from a place of confidence, be able to be in pain, but not be attached to needing the pleasure, being able to be a human and have experiences where you feel sad, but you're over it in 2 minutes. And again, when not saying should, she never says, Daddy, I should go, play with the dog. She goes and she plays with the dog.
She doesn't, yeah.
And once she's done with that, if she gets bored, she says, Daddy, book. We go read a book. It's very direct. It's very cute. But it's also very spiritually refreshing. Truly, it's a great reminder of play. And for you to be able to get yourself to even begin to think about moving into that space helps all of us do that. I had a dream about you, and the word that came to me was softening. And I was told, when you soften, everyone else softens. This can be taken metaphorically, or it can be taken literally. Because guess what? I could be wind right now, right? So whenever I soften, everyone softens. Whenever Isabel softens, everyone softens. So it's just really cool to hear what you just said. And I wanted to say, that's beautiful. And play is not easy to dive into, but a baby can do it.
We did it when we at some point in our lives, we did it.
Right. And yeah. So would you guys say we're returning back to that? Is that the reality? So bringing things full circle.
Yeah.
Is that where we are returning to as a human family? Is to a sense of play, purity of heart, I would say, kindness, compassion. Is that what you guys feel, or who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I feel like everything you describe is just going back to how we were born, like the divine light, that true being, which is maybe the ultimate reality. Maybe everything we're experiencing outside of that is actually fake. Like it's not the ultimate reality.
Yeah,
We're building a scenario, or we're building a play in the sense of like theater and movie that we're not heard of. So
because it's somewhere in the development of the hominin was foraging and hunting, to provide food for however many people you had to provide food for, whether it was you, a tribesman, or your village. From there, the need started to come. Okay, now we got to be able to store food through seasons for whatever reason. Or hunting doesn't provide enough food, or whatever. Or maybe you're in tundra and you can't really eat anything but whatever meat is around. Anyway, so systems, we have to look at this anthropologically. Somewhere along the lines, then all of a sudden the need for community and hoarding food and supplying the facilities to be able to store the food came. Well, then that produces a whole new set of rules that people just sort of haphazardly agree upon to protect what they've got in the system that they've got. They're not thinking much other than survival, and you're not thinking too far ahead. And then you start to develop that. Okay, well, they probably had, my guess is they didn't have marriage. They just had people sleeping with each other, but that's good because reproductivity is what you would want, because you want to now protect your people and your tribe, and you want it to grow and thrive. But most likely, cousins were, brother and sister were sleeping together, mother and child, father and daughter, like they were probably all like, this is how things started to develop and grow. And along this became more and more systems and more systems, but it's always been a reactionary system based off of the need for more.
Right.
It's always been a reactionary. It's never been like the early hominid was so forward thinking that they knew that in 2,000 years or 20,000 years or 2 million years, we were going to need these things, and it was going to have to look like this. It's never been that. The rules enacted in place right now through each government in the world is based off reaction and never anything super forward thinking.
Right.
Because forward thinking would be really back to where we are as a basic primate, as a basic child, which is like play. That was our basic needs: play, eat, shelter. We were living outside. We didn't have sleeping bags. We didn't have houses and Wi-Fi.
You like this a lot. This is perfect, and it's a segue into this video I saw the other day where there was this, I guess, this forest man. He just had a loincloth on. He was sitting on the beach drinking a juice out of a coconut. This guy in a tux comes over with a suitcase and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "What? What should I be doing?" And the guy in the suitcase goes, "Well, you should be making money." The woodsman says, "What's money? And what do you do with it? And why is it important?" He says, "Well, you need money because then you can buy a yacht, and then you can buy a house, and then you can buy all these riches, and then you can have a big company. Then you can have people work for you." And then the woodsman says, "Well, why would I do that?" And he says, "Well, because it feels good." And he says, "Okay, and then what?" And the businessman says, "Well, then you go and sit on the beach and drink juice." And the woodsman says, "Like I'm doing right now?" Like, hello? And the businessman was like, oh my, like he was beside himself. So you basically reiterated that all of this busyness that we give ourselves, the work we do, the cars, the realities that we create, the movements of life that we create are nothing more really than us trying to play. The thing is, we've lost what that is. We're serious because we've lost that childlike essence that is always there. And so we need to be, we don't need to be. It may be more
because you cut out when you started saying
if we can sit on the beach and drink our juice.
Yeah, that's funny. It's so true. Chris, you were cutting out and you were saying we need to be or something.
And you cut out. When you started to say we need to be, you went.
Yeah. Nope.
And then when you said we don't need to be.
Yep.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
We don't need to be any of it. We don't need to.
So cool.
We don't need to take Donald Trump out of the world. We don't need to take the Donald Trumps out of the world. We don't need to take the spiritual assholes out of the world. We don't need to take you and me out of the world. But we also, none of us actually need to be here either. It's all
right. I was gonna say we don't need to be.
Choice. It's all one choice. Right. What we're trying to do is somehow, what we've always been trying to do is make a collective agreement upon a reality. But I think the only way that's going to happen now is what we're talking about, allowing the reality to be so multifaceted that it doesn't have to have membership. The membership becomes because you are uniquely you, I'm uniquely me, and the people we call our tribe are uniquely themselves. And what we realize is that the whole world is one tribe. Donald Trump to the Pope, to the guy in the rainforest, to the guy in the caves in northern India, to you and me and Isabel, to our children. Like, everybody's part of it. We're all part of the tribe. And all that is a memory. That's just a recollection. Right. That's not even anything we have to recreate. It's already there.
It's already there.
Just gotta, if we want to recognize that, the only thing that would have to change, if we want to recognize that, is just allowing. But we don't even have to do that.
The only thing, I know. The only thing we have in common is that we're all different, right? That there's no, we're we're all always changing.
Yeah.
We're all always evolving. And now as I'm saying this, go ahead, Isabel, actually, go ahead.
No, we are different, but yet we're all
the same.
All the same.
Yeah.
We can't get away from how overlapping we all are, just like the sacred geometrical circles. We're all.
I was going to say this is sacred geometry right now. What we're talking about is sacred geometry. This is the toroidal field in and of itself.
Right, exactly. Just like 6 and 3 is part of 9.
Right now. Yes, exactly. Yep. You can't have the 9 without the 3 and the 6. You can't. It's not possible. You cannot have the torus, the toroidal field, without that output of energy and the two polarities. Because guess what? One of those is a negative, one of them is a positive, but they're all doing something to bring everything back into the center. Mm-hmm. So you guys are amazing. This is so much fun for me. Like it's so cool to be on this podcast. I want to tell the listeners to keep tuning into this work that Isabel and Winda are doing. It's truly transformative. It's something that may help people, may not. But for me, I know it's making me feel good in this moment. And I trust that wherever this energy is supposed to go, that it finds those hearts and those souls that it's meant to. Yeah. But I just did want to say to both of you, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's like so cool. Sitting in a bathroom, eating a cookie, like talking about what we call reality.
So you are in the bathroom of a cafe. That's freaking awesome. You've been sitting there the whole time. Yeah. I'm surprised nobody's been like, dude, let me in.
I don't know. Look, there's the toilet.
Yeah. Already my favorite episode, man.
This is a beautiful place.
Whatever reality makes it, right?
Perfect for the topic of reality. I love it.
Yeah, it's so cool because we're always creating it. It's like we're always creating it. Even little things that we do that we don't think are significant. I have this game on my iPad I like to play. It's this football game. And you guys are going to love this. So in that game, you can like choose how much money you get to sign players. And whenever I get like a big contract, I think in myself, yes, I totally accept that money. That is real. So
I love it.
I'm creating that reality through a video game, calling in this abundance, financial money through this video game. Because nothing is separate. The energy that I put into that game, even though it's just a game, mm-hmm. It's still energy. It's still going to move and it's still going to show up somehow. So whenever we can, as both of you have said, take ourselves out of the mind, the thinking mind, and I would say the grown-up mind, and see life as one, no matter how it's showing up, what it's showing up like, and play with that. I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is already fun.
Right.
I recently had this awesome, and I don't know why this is hitting me right now, but I'm going to say it. Just a few days ago, I was talking with my partner, Taylor, and we were talking about how, because she was asking about different star systems, like she'd never heard of Pleiades. And I said, well, and then there's like Andromeda, which everybody knows that like in such and such time, the Milky Way galaxy and the Andromedan galaxy are going to collide. And she said, and it's like, she goes, what if they've already collided and people just haven't figured it out yet? And I said, that is exactly the truth about the Kali Yuga, which people say that Krishna died and the Kali Yuga started, and that at some point in the future, Kali Yuga is going to end. Krishna will come back and eradicate all the separation from the world. And every time I dial in, it's like, no, it never actually started. We've never been separate. It's just our minds. And that's the exact same truth about what she said. Well, what if Andromeda and Milky Way have already collided? Because in the truth, and I mean, she's 100% right, because in the truth is, there is no such thing as time and space. So these things don't even actually exist as separate energy fields anyway. Yeah.
I love it, because you're, and I feel a little bit of void talk here, because that's it. There's no, you said the word mind. When you take yourself, not destroy it, not demonize it, not put it down, but when you simply don't identify with the mind, then everything is everything. You can start to see the connections to the Pleiades, to the Arcturians. All realities exist because remember, we're all, on some degree, manifesting from the nine energy, from that infinite, undefinable essence of what we call life into this physical, playing around, doing these things. But everything happens and exists simultaneously. You get to choose what you want to experience. In that choosing is whenever we identify with mind. Mm-hmm. But in order for the experience to appear real, we need the mind to send out specific projections so that we can have the experience. But the reality is we don't. It's all fake, right? It's all Maya. It's all an illusion.
Yeah.
So
it's true.
Everything happens. Taylor's 100% right. Guess what? The apocalypse has happened.
Mm-hmm. I never actually started. It was never a thing. I mean, we might see these different things play out in a timeline, but the truth is that's only because we're perceiving it from a human mind. If the human mind survives as long as some of these things may or may not occur. But 100. The truth is they've already occurred because they never actually happened and they were never going to happen. It's just, this is just a level of reality that we're experiencing.
Reality. Dun, 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 dun.
It's so hard to really like mind, but I like that. It's very uncomfortable for my mind, but it's good.
Well, I know the mind hates it. The mind hates it and it wants to say it's wrong, but it doesn't matter what the mind says. This is the first thing we start to learn as we develop our true consciousness, is that the mind is wrong on everything.
Indeed.
It's never right on anything, which means that there's no limit to the amount of wrongness that the mind is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so timely because today I was teaching a class which is called Compassionate Interaction. And I was talking about how like we create our own reality, and it's funny because you'll notice that people who say like, oh, my reality suck and life suck and all this, it's a reflection of your inner being really often, most of the time anyway. And it's funny because the person was sharing how uncompassionate the interactions were within her colleagues and how it sucked and how like they were never listening to her and blah, blah, blah. And yet what she was sharing with the group, she was doing it to our group. It was so cool, and it sucked in some ways because it ruined my well, it didn't ruin my life, but it kind of probably ruined it for some of the participants to have this complainer throughout the whole session. But yet she was doing to us what she was saying doing to her, and I just loved it because when there is something in your reality,
it's the law of a reflection.
Yeah, exactly. And that's your reality. And I feel like that's why our reality is there in so many ways, is to show us like, if you see this, it's because it needs to change inside of you, right?
So Isabel, something's coming through, not to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
But this is important. I'm getting to a point where words are losing meaning. That's how I feel right now, is that these words are actually losing meaning because it's all meaningless. The only reason something means something is because we give it meaning. Anyways, whenever we say I, me, you, we are still living in that projected reality. Every single time. Because there is no we, there is no you, there might be one infinite I. And through that, there's a we, you, and me. But whenever we start to define our experiences with those things, that's when it can become tricky. And that's why it's the law of reflection. Because there's only the essence expressing itself through the... Yeah. Are you guys closing up? Yeah, I think someone has actually wanted to use the bathroom. Almost done.
Yes.
Whenever you use your projection, whenever you start to project your reality, right, you then start to see it. You start to see it reflected back to you. I personally have been redefining. I personally have been redefining the law of attraction to the law of reflection, because I think we reflect. So, for instance, if I'm feeling really happy about something and I had a realization, and I go on Facebook, and all of a sudden there's something that has that same exact quote or something like that, I'm going to say it's the law of attraction. Is it? Or is it the reflection of your state of being? You see?
It's pretty much both.
Or is it both? Right. So, guys, I do want to be mindful to the people trying to come in here. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we
Reality's colliding. Reality's colliding. You're in the bathroom and somebody else needs to use that bathroom.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
So
That's
how
cool.
can our listeners find you?
All right. So we as the Heart Center, we're actually giving a free summit coming up here in a couple weeks that everyone can register for on the website. It's free. It'll be on Facebook. It'll be ran through Facebook. You can get in touch with us, the Heart Center, at www.theheartcenter.space, or you can go to Instagram at 9theheartcenter. Same thing for Facebook. Those are probably the easiest ways to send a quick email, www.theheartcenter.space. And this thing that we just did right here, right now, is the kind of things we do with the Heart Center. So
cool.
I hope to see you all there soon.
Yes.
I want to say peace and purity, love, light, and dark, and turmoil and frustration, all of it to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Wind, it was so cool to see you. Isabel, it was so cool to see you guys too.
See you and chat with you. Thank you so
all right.
much.
Thanks, listeners.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thanks, everyone. See you next episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty.
Hey guys, this is Isabel. I just thought I would step back in and mention what just happened with Chris. So you heard Chris had to leave because someone was knocking on the bathroom, which is hilarious. And what happened is the person who needed the bathroom name was Isabel, and her t-shirt had the number 9 on it. So I just thought that was like unreal, and I wanted to share that with you.